We often think of Hollywood's golden age as a glossy time when major studios ruled like monarchs, signifying wealth, glamour, and polished images. The truth is more nuanced. From the 1920s into the 1950s, the country faced seismic shifts. The Great Depression left millions out of work, then World War II cast a long shadow across daily life. Everyone was struggling in one way or another, yet people still craved entertainment and escape from harsh realities. In the middle of this, Ward Bond came of age, forging his own path amid the chaos. He was born in the early years of the 20th century, at a time when modern technology was starting to transform everyday life. Automobiles were just becoming commonplace. Silent movies were giving way to talkies, and radio was connecting communities across vast distances. This was also the heyday of college football's emerging prominence as a major American pastime. And that turned out to be a huge factor in Bond's life, too. His early background wasn't the typical Hollywood fairy tale. Wardell Edwin Bond, yes, Wardell was his given name, was born on April 9, 1903, in Benkelman, Nebraska. If you've never heard of Benkelman, don't worry, most folks haven't. It was and still is a small town. Growing up, he experienced that good old Midwestern upbringing. Life was no picnic, but there was a certain wholesomeness, a neighborly spirit, that people often associate with that part of the country. Bond spent a chunk of his childhood in Denver, Colorado, where his family moved at some point. In those days, being from a small place that wasn't part of the Hollywood circuit could make it tricky to break into acting. Yet Bond from an early age had two things working in his favor: a robust physical presence and a knack for forging genuine friendships. In the late 1920s, Bond attended the University of Southern California, USC. He was part of their football team at a time when college sports, particularly football, were skyrocketing in national attention. Imagine stadiums filling with roaring crowds, radio announcers describing every pass and tackle in breathless detail, and young students dreaming of professional sports glory. That was the atmosphere at USC, and Ward Bond thrived in it. He was a solid athlete known for being tough and dependable on the line, but not necessarily the star of the team. Still, it's not an exaggeration to say that playing football at USC changed Bond's life forever. It put him in the orbit of another student athlete who would become not just a close friend, but also a legendary figure of the silver screen, Marion Morrison, the man we all know as John Wayne. That friendship between Bond and Wayne wasn't just casual. They clicked in a way that few college buddies do, bonding over a shared love of sports, mischief, and eventually the movies. Legend has it that the two were involved in a serious car accident that ended Wayne's athletic career, inadvertently steering him toward Hollywood. Bond was right there in that crashed vehicle. While Wayne's injury may have knocked him off the football field, it also opened an unexpected door. Wayne took up a part-time job on a movie lot and started working as a prop boy. Ward Bond followed close behind. Before they knew it, they were extras, then bit part players, then forging onward in Hollywood's labyrinth. That chance event set in motion two sprawling careers that would forever reshape the landscape of American film. Hollywood in the 1930s was an industry in flux. Talkies were still relatively fresh, and studios were scrambling to refine production methods that could maximize both profits and star power. The Big Five studios, Paramount, MGM, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, and RKO, largely dictated who got cast and in what pictures. For an up-and-comer like Bond, the environment demanded grit and a willingness to take any job offered, no matter how small. And that's precisely what he did. Throughout the early 1930s, he stacked up numerous minor roles. Sometimes he was the muscle in the background, the tough guy with a single line, or an unnamed policeman, a truck driver, whatever was needed. At a glance, these roles might seem forgettable, But Bond didn't see it that way. Each appearance gave him a new chance to learn the craft, to observe directors, co-stars, and camera setups. His imposing stature and gravelly voice often led to him being typecast as a policeman or a henchman, but he quickly became known as someone who was reliable, punctual, and easy to direct. Off camera, Bond also began building a reputation as a prankster. He and John Wayne were notorious for pulling light-hearted stunts on set, boosting morale, or just letting off steam in an industry known for grueling hours and cutthroat competition. Bond's sense of humor was beloved by some and dreaded by others, especially if you happened to be on the receiving end of one of his jokes, but beneath that was a genuinely warm heart. What often gets overlooked, though, is how Bond's path intersected with another towering figure, the director, John Ford. Ford had a keen eye for talent, but beyond that, he valued loyalty and camaraderie, traits that Bond carried in spades. Ford's stable of repeat collaborators, often referred to as the John Ford Stock Company, became a hallmark of his filmmaking. If Ford liked you, you'd show up time and again in his pictures, from westerns to war dramas to intimate character studies. Bond fits seamlessly into this environment, forging bonds with fellow actors like Henry Fonda, Harry Carey Jr., and of course John Wayne. This creative family, under Ford's direction, gave Bond a steady stream of opportunities to appear in top-tier productions, shaping him into a seasoned supporting player who could handle comedic bits, tense dramatic sequences, or action-packed stunts without blinking an eye. By the late 1930s, Bond was racking up appearances in movies that would later be considered classics. Bringing Up Baby, 1938, directed by Howard Hawks, saw Bond pop up in a brief but memorable role. Then came Gone with the Wind, 1939, albeit in a small part. But it was in the 1940s that Bond truly began to leave his mark on Hollywood's collective consciousness. He appeared in The Grapes of Wrath, 1940, once again under Ford's eye, and then in The Maltese Falcon, 1941, directed by John Huston. That's the film that launched Humphrey Bogart into top-tier stardom. Watching it today, one can catch glimpses of Bond's underlying versatility. He could stand toe-to-toe with the biggest names in the business, delivering lines with a grounded presence that made you believe he was right there in the thick of the story. One of Bond's most iconic collaborations with director John Ford would be They Were Expendable, 1945, set in the Pacific Theater of World War II. The film starred John Wayne and Robert Montgomery, focusing on the American PT boat crews in the early days of the war. Bond portrayed the gruff but dependable Boats Mulcahy, a role that perfectly matched his no-nonsense aura. Off-camera, there was a palpable sense of patriotism among the cast and crew, many of whom had either served in the armed forces or felt deeply connected to those who did. Bond himself, like many Hollywood figures of the era, supported the war effort by entertaining troops and donating time to Bond drives. But within that outward sense of unity, Hollywood politics was starting to brew new forms of tension that would soon overshadow many careers, including Bond's. During the World War II, Hollywood had largely rallied behind the American cause, but the post-war period brought fierce ideological debates. As the Cold War set in, certain corners of Hollywood became paranoid about communist infiltration. This was the era of the House Un-American Activities Committee, SHUAC, and the Hollywood Blacklist, when reputations could be destroyed by a single accusation or even a hint of suspicion. Many actors and filmmakers found themselves under scrutiny, and alliances formed along political lines. Ward Bond, known for his staunch conservative views, became affiliated with the Motion Picture Alliance for the preservation of American ideals, a group that included John Wayne, Gary Cooper, and others. They believed it was crucial to keep communist influence out of American films. This stance wasn't without controversy. For some, Bond's deep convictions seemed to border on bullying. Stories circulated that he was instrumental, or at least eager, in ostracizing Hollywood figures suspected of leftist leanings. Whether these tales are fully accurate or exaggerated, they contributed to a narrative that Bond was a zealous anti-communist. Privately, many actors steered clear of crossing him, wary that he had powerful friends who could make or break a career. On set, though, he generally maintained a reputation for professionalism and cordiality, so long as you didn't veer into political debates. But the Hollywood rumor mill being what it is, certain accusations, and even outright lies, tended to swirl. Some considered him a patriot standing up for American values, while others viewed him as a reactionary enforcer. Amid this fraught political atmosphere, Bond continued to churn out memorable performances. One of his more famous roles was in It's a Wonderful Life, 1946, directed by Frank Capra. Bond played Bert the cop, a loyal friend to James Stewart's George Bailey. If you watch the movie with fresh eyes, Bert's calm reliability is a reassuring presence, and that was much like Bond himself in real life. Loyal to friends, unwavering in his convictions, and always ready to stand guard, so to speak, for the things he cared about. Today, It's a Wonderful Life is considered a heartwarming holiday classic, but at the time of its release it wasn't an immediate box office smash. It found its broader fan base much later, which ironically means that Bond's performance as Bert would go on to be one of the most widely seen roles of his career, especially as annual television broadcasts turned the film into a holiday staple. One area of Bond's life that often remains in the shadows is his personal relationships. He married Doris Sellers Childs in 1936. As with many Hollywood couples of that era, it's tough to separate fact from rumor when discussing their marriage, but we do know they divorced in 1944. He would eventually remarry in 1954 to Mary Louise May and stayed with her until his death. People close to Bond often described him as a paradox. Deeply loyal, yet prone to mood swings, generous to friends, but capable of intense arguments. He had a knack for blending into large social gatherings, making jokes, being the life of the party, yet certain acquaintances described him as lonely at times, especially during the 1940s. Maybe that was the flip side of being a character actor. He was always in motion, always part of an ensemble. He didn't often step into the lead, so perhaps there was a lingering sense of wanting more. Still, Bond found deep camaraderie on set, particularly in John Ford Productions. When Ford directed Fort Apache, 1948, the first of the so-called Cavalry trilogy, Bond was right there in the thick of it, along with John Wayne and Henry Fonda. The film carried themes of honor, duty, and understanding between cultures, a reflection of the times as Americans grappled with the post-war world and the early stages of the Cold War. Off-camera, Bond reportedly took part in extensive social gatherings with Wayne, Fonda, Ford, and others, rehashing old stories, playing cards, and occasionally diving into heated political discussions. For Bond, though, it was all part of a robust, emotionally charged life. He seemed to relish the friction, the debate, the sensation that everyone in the room was fully alive, shaped by a sense of purpose. Beyond the screen, he was also known for his comedic mischief. One anecdote that gets passed around is how Bond once smuggled a live chicken onto a set, just to see how his co-stars would react during a rehearsal. Another time, he replaced real bullets with blanks in a friend's hunting rifle. Highly dangerous, if you think about it by modern standards, yet indicative of the carefree attitude that floated around Hollywood's old guard. These sorts of tales reveal a man who couldn't resist a laugh, even if it ruffled some feathers. For the most part, these pranks were considered good-natured, but it's clear that Bond's brash sense of humor was not everyone's cup of tea. Some co-workers found it disruptive or even intimidating, given his political clout. What truly catapulted Bond into the broader American consciousness was his transition to television in the late 1950s. By then, the movie industry was feeling the challenge of TV, and many actors who might have avoided the small screen at all costs in earlier years were now open to it. Bond took the starring role in Wagon Train, a Western TV series that followed a traveling wagon train across the old American frontier. The show debuted in 1957, and Bond played Major Seth Adams, the wagon master. This was a big deal. For the first time in his career, he was consistently top billed, the main attraction, and not just a supporting face. Millions of viewers tuned in weekly, enthralled by the show's blend of adventure, moral lessons, and an idealized version of pioneer life. Bond thrived as Major Adams, and his authority on set was not just fictional. He became something of a leader behind the scenes as well, credited by some for creating a harmonious environment, while others found him overbearing. Wagon Train climbed the ratings, sometimes even outranking mega hits like Gunsmoke. Bond finally had the star status that had eluded him during his decades in Hollywood. He'd worked relentlessly to get there, proving that perseverance could indeed pay off, even if it arrived a bit later in life. But with success came new pressures, long shooting schedules, location filming, and the ever-present specter of health issues. Bond had been a heavy smoker and drinker for years, which took a toll on his body. Bond was plagued by health scares as early as the mid-1950s. Some say his close friends had been urging him to slow down, maybe cut back on the booze and cigarettes, get more rest, and take time away from the daily grind of filming. But Bond was a workhorse. He rarely missed a day on set unless he absolutely had to. In a heartbreaking twist, it was on November 5th, 1960, during a break from filming Wagon Train in Dallas, that Bond collapsed and died from a massive heart attack. He was 57 years old. For fans and colleagues, the news was a profound shock, coming at a time when he was at the zenith of his career. John Wayne, who had been a friend for over 3 decades, was said to be devastated. Bond's last will and testament contained a poignant detail that underscores his playful, loyal nature. He left $500 to John Wayne so Wayne could purchase a gun in Bond's memory. It was a quirky gesture that perfectly captured the spirit of their bond, the camaraderie, the sense of mischief, and the shared history that started on a college football field and ended under the bright lights of Hollywood stardom. Wayne later joked about it, but it was clearly a sentimental token, reminding everyone that beneath the tough exterior was a man who held his friends close to his heart. On a personal level, Bond's passing affected the entire cast of Wagon Train. The show continued, but the absence of Major Adams was profoundly felt. Fans wrote letters lamenting the loss, and the production team scrambled to find a way to move forward. It was a stark reminder of how real-life tragedy can abruptly transform a fictional world that so many had come to embrace. Although new actors stepped in to fill the void, for many viewers, the show was never the same without Bond's gravelly wisdom steering the wagon. That emotional gap revealed just how significant Bond's presence had become, a testament to his ability to anchor a story and connect with audiences. The complicated aspect of Bond's legacy lies largely in his political engagements and personal conduct. Some historians argue he used his influence to blacklist colleagues with more liberal or leftist views during the height of the Red Scare. Others suggest that while Bond was a fervent anti-communist, he never orchestrated deliberate campaigns to ruin careers. The truth might lie somewhere in between. Hollywood at the time was rife with paranoia, and Bond's vocal stance could be interpreted in many ways, depending on who was telling the story. Yet his unwavering loyalty to John Wayne and John Ford, coupled with their own conservative leanings, certainly placed Bond in a camp that had no patience for leftist ideologies. It's a topic that remains contentious among film scholars, some of whom see him as a patriotic advocate for American values, while others consider him a heavy-handed zealot. If we step back and look at the broader cultural resonance, Bond's career tells us a lot about mid-century America. He embodied a certain brand of rugged individualism, a no-nonsense approach that valued honesty, loyalty, and a bit of old-fashioned stubbornness. He came from a small town in Nebraska, found community on the football field, and parlayed that camaraderie into the often fickle world of Hollywood. He worked with some of the most revered directors and actors in film history, weathered the storms of political controversy, and eventually found a star vehicle on television that showcased him like never before. For older film audiences, Bond remains an endearing icon of classic Hollywood, a dependable supporting man who made every film he touched a little more believable. For younger generations who discover him through channels like streaming platforms or classic movie reruns, there's an almost nostalgic quality to his performances. Reminders of a cinematic style that favored deliberate pacing, robust archetypes, and moral clarity. Watching him interact with John Wayne or Henry Fonda, or seeing him guide that wagon train west, is like stepping back into a world where the lines between good and bad, right and wrong, felt more clearly drawn, even if real life was anything but simple. His story reminds us that the great tapestry of Hollywood's golden age wasn't woven solely by headlining superstars. It was crafted also by the reliable supporting actors who turned each scene into something real, layered, and memorable. Ward Bond may not top the charts of universal name recognition, but watch enough classic films and you'll realize he's there, steady as a rock in the background, offering a wry grin, a stern warning, or a comedic aside. He stands as a testament to the idea that sometimes the best stories are just off-center, waiting for someone to pause and pay closer attention. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.